Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. Hey everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Grow It, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 154. In this episode, I interview Jackson Farmer, also known as Farmer Freeman. He's been gardening for 16 years and has a bachelor's and a master's in biology from American University. He grows a variety of plants, and he owns a company that specializes in plant testing, such as DNA sex testing and testing for pathogens. He talks all about various plant pathogens, their symptoms, how to test for them, and how to combat them, if possible. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped make that goal possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their Cloud Ray Gen 2 oscillating clip fan. Their next gen clip fan has been re-engineered to provide a long-lasting motor and customizable airflow for all stages of your plant's growth cycle. It features 10 speeds and 10 dynamic wind modes to simulate outdoor airflow and links with UIS controllers for Wi-Fi app control. Click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their Cloud Ray clip fans, and the discount code MrGrowIt15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com. Stash Blend. Stash Blend is a 2-1-5 plant additive that can be used with synthetic bottled nutrients or in living soil systems. Simply mix half teaspoon of Stash Blend into a gallon of water, then water your plants with it. Ingredients include corn steep liquor, seaweed extract, humic acid, beneficial bacteria, silica, and mycorrhizal fungi. Check it out at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. Spider Farmer. Check out their new self-watering system. This gravity-fed watering system provides a power-free way to keep your medium dialed in at the appropriate moisture level. Several pot sizes will work in this system, up to a 7-gallon fabric pot. The complete kit includes a reservoir, watering bases, wick lines, and grow bags. The reservoir plate lifts pots off the ground, preventing algae buildup. More information is linked in the description section below, and discount code MrGrowIt5 works on both Amazon and their website, spider-farmer.com. And we are back, and I'm joined with Jackson Farmer, but some of you know him as Farmer Freeman. How you doing today?
Hey, doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on to the podcast today. Today we're going to talk all about various pathogens that can harm or completely kill your plants. So there are 7 different ones I'd like to go over today, and we might get into more. And I'd also like to get into DNA sex testing. But first, can you do an introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into gardening?
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Jackson Farmer. I'm the owner and operator of Farmer Freeman. We're a plant DNA lab based in Washington, D.C., and we primarily just perform testing services for other growers. So our main thing is the plant DNA sex test, and then now we've ventured into doing pathogen detection tests to further help them with their plants. I started growing in high school. I'm 32 years old now. I had a good friend whose mom was nice enough to lend us a closet, and we built out a nice little grow tent and ordered a bunch of stuff from like HTG Supply, like one of the original like online grow shops. Got our seeds shipped from Amsterdam. Just the typical startup back in the mid thousands, and so that was 16 years ago, and these days, I'm living in a different state, living here in DC, and I've got the tent set up and a nice little outdoor patio.
Awesome. Yeah, I know I was first introduced to you and kind of your services. Geez, how long ago was that now? 5+ years ago or something like that? It was
definitely pre-COVID. I want to say like 2018, 2019.
Yeah,
you were definitely one of our first returning customers, and it's been an awesome relationship with the shout outs and everything.
Yeah. So I a lot of my audience is familiar with you through kind of me using your services and promoting in my videos and stuff like that, and I still use it to this day. By the way, I sent over 12, so I'm hoping to hear back the results here by the end of the week, hopefully. It was really fast turnaround time, which we'll get into all that probably later on in this episode, kind of the services that you offer. Yeah, that's a service that I use and promote because I really like it. I believe there's so many benefits to doing the DNA sex testing, which we'll get into later on in this episode. Before we actually linked up here and started recording this episode behind the scenes, you mentioned that you wanted to break these pathogens up into groups. First group being viruses and viroids, second group being fungal root pathogens, and then the third group being pathogens affecting flowers. So let's start with the viruses and viroids. Can you break it down for us? What are some of the different viruses and viroids that affect medicinal plants?
Yeah, thanks. So the viruses and viroids in this industry are a relatively new concern. I think hop latent viroid was kind of discovered and described in these plants just within the past 10 years, whereas, a lot of these other pathogens like powdery mildew, I mean, that's been talked about for decades. But yeah, so these viruses and viroids, hop latent viroid is definitely the most common and most talked about viroid. That's the number one viroid test that we do. And that's going to, cause stunting in your plant, kind of weird, like narrow, maybe discolored leaves, maybe leaves that are growing at angles that are unlike your other plants. You'll also notice your flowers will be reduced in size and reduced in quality. And because of all that, it's been had a major economic impact on commercial grow facilities. And so since it's been described and identified, companies like mine have been able to develop tests to detect it. And now we're seeing cultivation centers, by diligently testing, they're able to identify infected plants, remove them from their facilities, and just keep their facilities operating at 100%. It can spread quite quickly, and so we've heard of some facilities basically having to chop down everything and start from scratch, and it's heartbreaking to hear about. Some of the other viruses would be beet curly-top virus, lettuce chlorosis virus, tobacco mosaic virus is one that gets talked about a lot. All of these, though, at least from what our lab can tell, they're incredibly rare. We get a lot of submissions for tobacco mosaic virus just because people will see like kind of discoloration or mosaic type patterning or patterns on their leaf surfaces. But there's so many other reasons that could happen, like basically any number of nutrient deficiencies, even genetics can cause that. So we very rarely ever see a sample that actually has tobacco mosaic. But people still want to test for it just to be sure. And that's one that's been in tobacco plants for a long time. It was actually like the first virus or viroid ever like kind of described in plants. And it can kind of persist. Like if you're just handling tobacco or tobacco products, you can get the viroid on your fingers or surfaces and start spreading it just like that. Beet curly top is interesting because as the name kind of alludes to, it's from the sugar beet plants, and I think it's relatively new to our industry because in the past the plants that we grow and my customers grow have been like kind of hidden or relegated to very confined growing spaces, whereas these days you can more easily grow them outdoors in larger fields. You see like a lot of traditional farms start to incorporate this new plant group into their kind of commercial operation, and because of that, they're in closer proximity to things like sugar beets, and then you start to see, bugs that would typically be found on sugar beets start to just literally they're called like leaf hoppers, and they're just little bugs that hop from plant to plant, and because our plants are now outdoors in these traditional farms, we're seeing, new diseases pop up in them. And so the beet curly top virus, again, it's really rare. We get a couple of submissions every now and then. Rarely ever see one positive. And the reason that people submit it is kind of like tobacco mosaic, where the symptoms of a lot of these diseases can be so similar to each other, and just very, like, I want to say, like, kind of like generic looking symptoms. So like a curling leaf, or narrow leaf, or maybe a bright yellow leaf are all symptoms of beet curly top, but that's also symptoms of over and underwatering and various nutrient deficiencies. So it's kind of challenging to provide guidance on if you should test for all of these things. Beet curly top is kind of nice because it's kind of regionally confined. You see it like in Colorado, New Mexico, California, basically these areas where sugar beets are grown. And therefore, we don't recommend it for someone growing outdoors in Maine, for example.
Got it. The beet curly top virus and the lettuce chlorosis virus. I don't know anybody who's gotten those two. And it's pretty interesting to hear that you don't really get many positives coming into your testing center, which is pretty interesting to hear. Kind of a relief, I guess you can say, that it's more of a rare occurrence. So are you saying is it more rare for indoor growers versus outdoor growers? Because you were talking about beet curly and kind of it being outdoors and transferring that way. Would you say it's mostly outdoors that there's a concern?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're growing indoors, or even if your greenhouse is like very isolated and not near any like, weeds or, like just random plants, then I don't think you have to worry about beet curly top. Maybe if you're getting a clone or a cut from a farm that maybe has beet curly top, you should be concerned. But yeah, I would only recommend it for like outdoor grows in these certain parts of the country. We really just got our first beet curly top positive sample a few weeks ago, and it was interesting. It was so interesting actually that I contacted one of the other labs I work with, and they had never actually heard of anyone having this, which is funny that we all test for these things, but they're still rare. But it just kind of shows like how valuable our crops are, and that we know that we need to be testing for this, just to protect the crop at all costs, basically. But yeah, so that other lab was interested. They're like, can your customer go and catch some of these bugs? Let's figure out which bugs are actually transferring this. How long do they survive in the plant or in the bug? And I mean, basically getting to the basics of trying to figure this stuff out. So it's all very new. It's an exciting space to be in. It's also kind of challenging in that there's just so much on the line with these diseases. As far as testing for them goes, it's a little bit different than a test for these other pathogens or plant sex. So viruses are RNA based as opposed to DNA based. So, just slightly different collection of samples, preservation of samples, and different kind of enzymes and stuff go into it. I mean, you can use a lot of the same equipment, but it is like we consider it like a totally separate thing than the plant sex test or these other pathogen tests.
I had a hop latent viroid test I submitted into you, and I remember going through the process. Maybe you walk us through it here, if I remember correctly. I had to take samples of 3 different sections, leaves off of 3 different parts of the plant, and also the root. Is that how it still is?
Yeah, so that's what we've been recommending. We actually, when we first started, we weren't doing root samples until it just became pretty publicly known, or kind of like the scientific consensus started to appear that root samples are going to be one of your best sources to detect it. And yeah, so because we don't know that much about your plants, like we don't really, we're very low key. We supply you these collection kits, we do the testing, but we're not like prying into your business. We don't ask like a bunch of information about your garden. And because of that, we want to get like a well-rounded collection of samples from your plant. So like you said, top, middle, bottom leaves. Whereas like if we knew specifically, like if you told us, hey, I have a brand new clone, then we might just say, hey, one top leaf should be sufficient. So when we get those samples, because we don't always know like what kind of plant it came from, we generally like will kind of combine all of those leaf samples together and basically just trying to get a good composition of the plant, a good representation of the plant.
That makes sense. Now, as far as stability of viroids, I actually did have somebody on my podcast before talking specifically about hot plate and viroid, and I took notes on it. And as far as stability, greater than 24 hours, it stays on most common surfaces, 7 weeks within water, greater than 90 days in fermented compost, 6 months on most dried plant material, several months hot plate and viroid can be in your soil or growing medium, and then years inside of a seed. So very stable from what I hear. And I was going to ask you, testing for seeds, can people submit in seeds for you to test?
So we've not validated our hot plate and viroid test on seeds.
Okay.
I think in theory it should be possible, but it's just like a little bit of work that we'd like to do before we start, accepting your money for that type of service. But yeah, like you just mentioned, it's incredibly stable. We have some leaf samples that we'll periodically pull out that we know are positive because we tested them a few years ago, and we'll just every couple of months pull it out, test it. It just consistently shows up positive. So I guess there's nothing really in that dried plant material that's going to cause the virus to go away or viroid to go away. So just like you said, incredibly stable. If you're working with dried plant material, you should definitely clean up your hands and stuff before you get into the cultivation rooms.
Keep me updated on seed testing because I'm 100% down to submit in seeds for testing. I can be your guinea pig if you need to.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll do that.
One last thing about hot plate and viroid. Do you feel it's over-exaggerated? You have a lot of people that are screaming hot plate and viroid, it's the worst thing to come around in this generation. Is it over-exaggerated, or is it a legitimate concern that is infecting? Some people say greater than 90% of grows are infected by this. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so we're not seeing anywhere near that 90% of grows. I think, our results are going to be a little biased because, we have a lot of people submitting samples just as a preventative measure, as opposed to us going into grows, finding the worst looking plants and sampling and testing those. But that's not to say like the impact is over exaggerated. I mean, it's definitely devastating to get into a commercial grow facility. I think if you're like a home grower and you grow from seed and you just do a couple cycles a year, 4 plants, 4 to 10 plants, I don't think it's going to be as impactful as if you're a commercial facility where, your employee's payroll is on the line of, every single harvest. So I think it kind of depends on who you are and how you grow. But certainly if you have it in your facility, you start to see that quality drop, that yield drop, and you have to figure out how to get rid of that or start over. You can't live with it, unfortunately.
That's rough. Now, one thing for the tobacco mosaic virus, you had mentioned you get a lot of submissions in for that, but not many positive results. And I think I have a gut feeling on why that is. You see a lot of these websites that post about tobacco mosaic virus, and they're showing pictures of plants with what looks to be variegation. You know what I mean? So I think there's some confusion. People see variegation on there, they match it up to what people are showing as tobacco mosaic virus. And so I think there's some confusion happening. And maybe that's why you're getting so many submissions in there, because it's just misinformation amongst the internet. Would you think that's potential or what?
Totally. So we have customers try to send us pictures, and have us diagnose based on the picture. And it's like, I'd never recommend you do that. There's a whole lot more context that's needed to even just make a guess on what it could be. Like if someone had a picture of a curling leaf, but it's an indoor garden, there's no way I'd say that's beet curly top. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, these people, they'll go online, find a picture of tobacco mosaic. Yeah, it looks like what I have. And that happens with like trying to diagnose nutrient deficiencies too. Where you'll think you have one certain deficiency just based on the picture, but if you like read the ingredients in that bottle of nutrients you're using, you'll probably have a better idea. Oh wait, this is totally missing zinc or something like that.
And that's really more for like tissue testing, right? If you were to do tissue testing, you could get a more accurate diagnosis of the nutrients in the plant, right? Have you ever thought about offering tissue testing? I know you don't do it now, right?
Yeah, no, it's not something we do. Definitely have thought about it. The thing about the tissue testing, plant nutrient testing, at least from what I understand, like the sample quality is going to have a big impact. Like you maybe want fresh, like non-dried samples, so that makes it a little more challenging to submit to the laboratory. Any kind of degradation during transit could impact it. Whereas like with these genetic-based tests, like that RNA and that DNA that we're scanning for is going to be very stable, regardless of the sample quality. So that's primarily why we don't do it, is because we don't want to have to deal with like trying to keep all this stuff fresh. It's also, larger. We need like whole leaves, stems, stalks, things like that. And it just requires like a larger facility. We can do like a whole lot with just the small space that we're currently in. So, when we work with genetics.
Understood. Let's move on to fungal root pathogens. Talk to us all about those.
Yeah, so that's going to be primarily Fusarium and Pythiums. Pythium species. So these are kind of newer tests that we offer, where we're generally testing root samples of plants. You definitely want to test your incoming clones, incoming moms, things like that, because once this fungus gets into your soil or your water supply, it can be kind of challenging to get rid of. So yeah, Fusarium and Pythium, kind of unlike hop latent will cause like a slow decline in your plant quality, but it won't like outright kill your plant. Fusarium and Pythium will kill your plant. The Pythium can cause browning of your roots, root rot, crown rot, and all that kind of results in like stunted, wilted, yellow leaves, and eventually death of your plant. Fusarium is similar, where you start to see like brown, dead areas of roots, and again your leaves become yellow, start wilting, and it'll just lead to total crop loss. So yeah, those are new tests that we highly recommend. We see a lot more positivity in those two tests than we do for other pathogens like tobacco mosaic or Botrytis, things like that.
For the Pythium, correct me if I'm wrong there, but is this really weighted towards hydroponic systems like deep water culture, RDWC? I hear a lot of people who come across these fungal pathogens because of too high of temperature, for example.
Yeah.
So if their water reservoir is over 75 degrees, I guess you can get away with it. But if it's upwards of 80 degrees or even higher, you could potentially get Pythium. Am I in the ballpark there?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so yeah, Fusarium and Pythium, they love hot wet environments. And so yeah, a hydroponic grow or even soil, if it's just like continuously watered, you're just creating a great environment for those species to thrive in.
So what would be the solution to that? Do you know, like, is there any like products or anything that people could put into their DWC system, for example, to help eliminate those fungal root pathogens?
I don't know about specific products. There's definitely like nutrient brands that will kind of advertise like, these maybe have like some biocidal properties within the nutrients. They'll help keep your reservoirs, cleaner. Keeping your reservoir water cool is going to be good to just kind of slow growth of any kind of fungus like that.
Okay, yeah, I just started in DWC actually, and my main concern was keeping that water temperature under control. Now, unfortunately, my concerns have been legitimatized because I checked the water temperature and it's at like 80 degrees. So like I'm now, and I'm seeing browning on the roots. So now I'm almost in, borderline panic mode. Now, luckily, I don't have a real valuable plant in there right now. Like I have more cuttings that I could use, so I could eliminate the plant that's in there if it gets really bad. But I am seeing the browning of the roots, and there is concern for a fungal root pathogen. So, yeah, I was just wondering some background on that and if there was a way to get rid of it or not.
Sure. Yeah. There's fungicides that can maybe target these specific species and cause minimal impact or no impact to your actual plant. So maybe check out those. Because, these have been infecting commercial crops, ornamental plants, things like that, and so there's like a lot of research that's gone into these as opposed to these industry-specific pathogens. Keeping your plant just like generally healthy. Your plants have immune systems. So if your plant is happy and healthy, it's going to be better at, kind of suppressing the effects of these fungus diseases if they're present in the environment. Once your plant gets sick, with Fusarium, then maybe Pythium or hop latent Viroid finds a better opportunity to come in, or vice versa.
Got it. And then as far as the testing process, you mentioned root samples. Can you walk us through that process? So like, if somebody's in soil, they're digging down in the soil and digging out a root sample, how long should it be? If you're in a DWC system, same deal. Are you just taking out and drying off the roots and then putting them into the package to ship out, or how does that work?
This information definitely subject to change, like as we learn more about best practices for sampling and, the kind of hot spots on your plant. But yeah, so for those right now, we recommend root samples. We only need like 1 or 2 inches of root sample. We don't need a whole lot. Ideally, cleaned off any like excessive dirt and stuff, because that's just going to save us a lot of time in the lab of having to clean your stuff before we can even test it. But yeah, you'll kind of dig around the base of the plant if it's in soil, try to pull up some of those root hairs that are coming off that central stalk, or like DWC, or if you have like rock wool on a flood table or something, you can just clip some of the exposed roots from there. And yeah, it doesn't need to be much. It should have minimal impact on your plant's growth or health.
Okay, and then on your website, you have a listing for Fusarium detection tests, and then one right next to it, Pan-Fusarium detection test, and it's $20 more. What's the difference between those two?
So the Pan-Fusarium test is going to screen for more species. So Fusarium is the genus, and then there's like Fusarium oxysporum would be a species. There's a bunch of different Fusarium species. So the first test that we offered was Fusarium oxysporum specific, and just over time, there's been development and testing to be able to target more species and be a slightly more effective test. We still have a lot of the Fusarium oxysporum specific reagents. So, until we run out of that, we're gonna test for it.
Okay. Is there anything else to be said about the fungal root pathogens, or should we move on to the pathogens affecting flowers?
Soil testing can be something to consider when testing for these fungal root pathogens. So you can, as opposed to like sending root samples, you can, our lab doesn't have like a whole protocol for this, but, in theory, you can do a test from the soil directly to see if that fungus is present. And that can help you decide, like, do we want to plant in this area of the field or find a different area that, maybe it's not present or maybe it's present in lower amounts.
Good advice. Okay, let's move on to pathogens affecting flowers. Talk to us all about it. What are they? The symptoms? What do the plants look like when they're infected? So on and so forth.
Yeah, so like your above ground kind of targets. So the main things, I think the one that almost everyone knows about is powdery mildew. So that's where you have those like little white spots, on your plant leaves or within, the flower itself. They start to emerge like early on in the flowering cycle, and basically just if you don't catch it and get rid of it, then you're gonna have a product that's basically unusable. So generally spread through clones and just sharing. It's also a fungus, and what has been kind of debated about powdery mildew is, is it only on the surface of the plant, or can it be found inside of the plant itself? And so there's evidence that it can vascularize into the plant tissue. So even if you don't have any visible symptoms of it, we recommend testing, especially if you're like in kind of a humid environment where that fungus can more easily grow. Then we definitely recommend testing for that. The other one, Botrytis, is generally called bud rot or gray mold, and so that's found within the flowers. Sometimes you'll find it after you harvest, and that can also just completely wreck your product. So yeah, these all of these, I recommend to test on incoming clones. I think if you're already seeing these things come up, it's not really worth testing for. I think at that point you need to get into, how do we remove this? Are there products that we can apply to treat the plant, or should we just get rid of the plant completely?
For the powdery mildew, you hear people trying to wash it off. If you do a search on YouTube, wash powdery mildew, Jorge Cervantes put out a video 13 years ago, and I remember when he put this one out because it caused a lot of controversy, where I think he's doing some sort of hydrogen peroxide solution, and he's harvested the plant, now he's washing it in this solution, and then he's hanging it to dry after the fact. Would you say that's an effective approach, or would you say that's not effective?
I don't know.
Not sure.
I think if you're dealing with a fungal thing like powdery mildew, I wouldn't want any moisture. But I'm not like an expert grower like that.
One can probably speculate that since you said it, there's evidence now that's inside the plant that just washing off the leaves isn't sufficient.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that video has 625,000 views, so I can only imagine how many people actually tried the process and potentially think they're washing it off completely, and unfortunately it might be internally in the plant and they're consuming that. So I don't know. For the Botrytis, now this is something I've come across before, and I had bud rot. I've told this story on my channel several times. Not fun to come across at all. Towards the end of the grow, these massive colas and opening it up and there's bud rot on the inside, Botrytis Cinerea. What I did back then was I cut off the infected parts and I kept the other parts. of the plant and I consumed them. Now, some people say that you shouldn't do that. You should dispose apart the whole plant. What's your take on that?
I don't know if there's like enough research. I mean, into like the human health effects of like ingesting something like that. I think there's plenty of better plant material out there. It's just not worth the risk. But yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I think one of the concerns is that there's spores, right? It's spores and they're easily able to go airborne. So if you're rummaging around with that bud that has Botrytis, it's going airborne and potentially getting on other parts of the plant. So I think that's what one of the main concerns was. But yeah, I understand that there's just not enough research out there, evidence to show one way or the other.
Right. So another pathogen that we test for is russet mites. So again, we recommend like if you getting a clone or if you're growing in an area that has had issues with those before, then it's probably worth testing. And we can detect just that russet mite DNA from eggs or anything that's invisible to the naked eye. We can detect that on the leaf through just genetic testing.
Nice. I wasn't even aware that you offered that. That's pretty cool. What does that testing process consist of for the pathogens affecting flowers? Is that the leaf samples or?
Yeah, so we would want leaf. I think if you're in a flowering stage, then leaves closer to your flowers would be suggested. If it's a clone, then just one or two leaves from just try to get like a representation of the plant. We can't test the entire plant, unfortunately, because we would destroy it. But we want to get a sufficient amount of material that leaves everyone confident. So for those tests, we don't bother asking for roots.
Okay. Now, are there any other pathogens that we should be aware of that maybe you don't personally offer as a service to test for, but they're out there, they're a concern? You don't have to get into details on them, but just kind of giving us a list maybe, and then the viewers could conduct their own research.
Yeah, I've heard of like hemp streak virus. Not sure how prevalent that is. It's not something that we offer. But yeah, I really couldn't speak on other things like that. I'm not like in that kind of research. I don't really have anything else on that.
Okay, no worries. Let's move on to DNA sex testing. Talk to us all about that. What is it? What does the testing process consist of? So on and so forth.
Yeah. So this is like our bread and butter at Farmer Freeman is the plant DNA sex test. So we basically help you sort out which seedlings you want to grow or not grow based on your goals. So obviously the female plants are the ones that make the flowers that have made this industry so popular. Whereas male plants will make pollen sacs, and once those open up and release pollen, your females get pollinated. They divert all their energy into seed production rather than nice flower production. So definitely want to be eliminating male plants as early as possible if you're not interested in using them for breeding purposes. And so typically in the past, you would have to visually identify the sex of your plant, while it's in that flowering stage, at least like 4 or 6 weeks after the plant sprouts. But by looking at the DNA of the plant, we can tell you just, within 7 to 10 days after sprouting, whether it's a male or female plant. So all we need for that is just a piece of leaf or stem, basically anything that's going to have that plant's DNA in it. We can take that DNA out, and then we screen it for the presence of a Y chromosome, which is only going to be found in the male plants. If we find it, we tag it male. If we don't, we tag it female and say, good luck with the rest of your grow. Have fun. Yeah, so that's been, just a huge time and resource saver for our customers. They're not having to, spend resources like water, nutrients, soil, growing these plants out for an extra few weeks. Rather, they're just getting rid of those plants before they're even out of like their seedling tray. It can save you, and also, I mean, not just the resource savings, but the risk mitigation. No one's perfect. There's definitely stories of people not noticing that their plant is a male, and that can be reduced by actually testing rather than relying on a visual identification. We definitely recommend the plant sex test, like for a new grower, because if you're investing in, if you're starting from scratch, buying a tent, buying bags of soil, you're gonna save so many resources by growing, only the 50% of plants that you need. That 50% that are going to be female. You're only growing those, only investing into the resources to grow those.
Yeah, it's definitely a time saver for sure. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I just submitted 12 in. So I had seedlings sprout from the medium. Within, I think it was like day 4, day 5 after being sprouted, I had enough leaf to take off samples, shipped them out to you. Now I'm just waiting to hear back. But I guess once you receive them, it's usually within 24 hours is I'm getting a email back with the results. So then I take those results and I can kill off all the males. And like you said, saving time, space, saving money on nutrients, soil. So like my goal is to have a result back and not have to transplant, right? I don't want to have to spend time going from a solo cup, transplanting up only to find out, oh, it's a male. Okay, now I'm going to wipe that off, and then time wasted on that avenue. So I'm a big fan of it. I will continue to use that service. Been using it since 2018 or whatever we first got introduced. And I did actually send in way back then. I was like, you know what? I'm going to test this service. I'm going to send in all feminized and let's see what result. And it was 100% accurate. It's been 100% accurate the entire time I've tried it out. So in my experience, it works. I did have one question in regards to this, and I think it's a big question. It's probably a common question for you is, can hermaphrodite plants be detected during DNA sex testing?
No. So, yeah, that's definitely like our number one most asked question. And hermaphrodite plants can be either genetically male or genetically female. Most of the time, you'll notice it from a result that we call female, because that's the plant that you're going to be keeping. But if you did keep and grow all those male plants too, you'll start to see that some of them are also herm and will grow flowers in addition to their pollen sacs. So unfortunately, like that Y chromosome's not required for pollen sac development. So you'll still see it come up in your genetic females. I don't think anyone's identified like a foolproof gene that can be detected. That's like, okay, if your plant has this, it will be a herm. I think there's probably a couple different kind of like genetic pathways for a plant to go through to start to express that. And so, yeah, so unfortunately we can't. But if you know what to expect from your plants, if you know like, hey, these 5 should be female and these 5 should be male, and they start to look off, then you might be dealing with a herm, and go ahead and get rid of that. I definitely think that there's some people out there who they grow a plant, they see pollen sacs, they think it's male, they start breeding with it, and they're unknowingly creating, feminized seeds because they didn't actually confirm if that plant was male or female before they started using that pollen. So yeah, no, we can't detect herms, unfortunately. When we do, we will definitely let everyone know, because I think that'll be a huge game changer.
Okay, good to know. So who uses DNA sex testing? Is it just home growers, or are you seeing commercial facilities use it a lot as well?
Yeah, so by numbers, like the majority of our customers are going to be home growers or caregivers, like growing, under 20 plants. But then we do have a lot of, cultivation facility, like big commercial clients who are, doing pheno hunts, planting hundreds of seeds at a time, and then submitting those samples to us, and then just over the course of a day eliminating a couple hundred plants and saving their their facility a whole lot of wasted space and time. So yeah, pretty much we work with the whole spectrum of cultivation styles and sizes.
Okay. And taking a step back and looking at the future, what do you think the future looks like in regards to plant pathogens? Do you think there are going to be new ones that pop up? And what does the future look like for plant pathogen testing? Do you foresee better technology coming about?
Yeah, so I think definitely we'll see more pathogens start to be identified and described, especially as these plants start to be grown in environments that they weren't before, such as like traditional outdoor farms. They're then next to a crop that no one's really grown it next to before, and you might see some kind of disease transmission that'll eventually get described. It's a whole new industry. There's going to be a lot of new environments and a lot of new things popping up that'll come up and get described, and then we'll develop tests for. As far as like the future of testing, kind of like the evolution of our Fusarium test, where we were only testing for Fusarium oxysporum for a while, because that was the most common Fusarium. But eventually, that product's evolved to now test for multiple species of Fusarium. I think you'll start to see more tests, like kind of tests become more comprehensive in their scope, as opposed to just like very specific single target tests. You'll also see, testing price reduce as, testing labs and manufacturers, enhance their testing volume. It's just like the natural cycle of how this goes. It's kind of like a race to the bottom, and how cheap can you get your reagents? How cheap can you perform the testing service? So you'll see, better scope, better technology, cheaper pricing. You'll also start to see there's a couple of companies out there now, but trying to let the consumer be able to test their plants themselves. So as opposed to relying on a third-party testing lab, they can, buy kits or buy certain pieces of equipment and perform these tests on site. And so that's going to be really helpful for people in more rural areas. Or if you are just super secretive about your operation, and you want to just maintain as much privacy as you can, then that'll be helpful for you.
Awesome. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes about in the future on that avenue. Well, Jackson, this has been an awesome episode, really informative. I learned a lot, and I'm sure my audience learned a lot as well. Let's wrap things up here. Can you tell the listeners how they can find you and what you have upcoming in the future? Yeah,
thanks. We're farmerfreeman.com. Farmer Freeman, EZXY on Instagram. We just, like I mentioned, better tests, cheaper tests, that's all coming down the pipeline. We have a big sale coming up in November. I think you and a lot of our other longtime customers know they can rely on sales twice a year for us, Black Friday and 420. And we have a new website launching soon that I'm really excited about. I'll be at MJ BizCon for the first time this year. Never been to that before, so I'm really excited to go check it out. I'm not going to have a booth, but I'm definitely going to bring some swag and try to meet as many customers as I can. There's so many of you that I haven't met face to face yet, and I'm excited to do that in December.
I'll be there. Let's link up for sure.
Yeah, great.
Well, I'll definitely have a link to Jackson's website, Farmer Freeman, down in the YouTube description section below. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, just search for them. You'll find them. Big thanks to all the Patreon supporters, patreon.com/MrGrowit. 100% of what is donated through Patreon goes right back into the podcast. It helps keeps the studio lights on here. The folks that are being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producer tier. Special thanks to you for your contributions. Jackson, once again, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. This has been awesome. I think it was a great overview of the different groups of pathogens. And I think it's a lot of helpful information that my audience is really gaining some value from. So thank you so much for coming on, and hope you enjoy the rest of your night.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I'll be in touch soon with your sex test results.
Awesome. All right. Peace out, everyone. Catch you in the next episode.